Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your commitment to punctuality. I want to open this morning's session first by thanking His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Mubarak Al Khalifa for so kindly hosting our opening dinner yesterday evening, and of course His Royal Highness the Crown Prince for his patronage of the Manama dialogue, and indeed His Majesty King Hamad for his constant support for this process of trans-regional defense diplomacy. A few of you have very kindly asked for a copy of the remarks that I delivered yesterday. I think there are physical copies that will be available to be picked up outside. For those of you who are more digitally inclined, a copy of my remarks in PDF form is on both the IISS website and the Manama Dialogue app that you can download. Let me begin in true defense, military, and security style with the rules of engagement of today. We have 5 plenaries today with 3 speakers per plenary, so 15 to get through by early evening. All the plenary statements are on the record, and the extensive Q&A for which we've provided ample time will also be on the record. I like to remind people that while the answers of the ministers and national security advisors and senior military personnel speaking on the stage are on the record, so are the questions, and therefore I hope those asking questions will be mindful also of their own reputations in framing their questions and making their remarks in a manner that is consistent with the type of dialogue that we wish to have today and for which we've established such an excellent tradition. Equally, some of you have asked for copies of the 2 strategic dossiers of the IISS that we released this month and that I trailed yesterday in my remarks: Iran's influence networks in the Middle East and ISR in the Gulf, and some of those are available in physical copy outside, but they are both downloadable as PDFs from the IISS website. We'll shortly begin in 90 seconds the first plenary session on regional competition and cooperation. I just want to remind you all of the technical point as to how you seek the floor. Each of you have access to a microphone. If you put your badge on the right-hand slot of the microphone and then press the speaker button, your name will come up on my electronic screen. You will be in the queue, and I will select people to speak from that queue in a way that ensures that we have a diversity of expressions of opinion from the floor. When you put your badge in and you press your button, your microphone is not on. So if you still want to say something indiscreet or jovial to your immediate neighbor, you can be assured that not all of us will necessarily hear it. But once I call your name, then I have the capacity, and so do the technicians behind, to turn your microphone on immediately. You do not need to touch the button again, or else you will turn your microphone off. And once you finish your remark, then your microphone will go off. So only 2 steps. Insert the card, press the button, you're in the queue, and we go from there. And with those technical introductions, and in the full knowledge that we've now settled the room, I'd like to introduce our opening panel. We have with us a great friend of the IISS and also the practice of defense diplomacy, Florence Parly, Minister of the Armed Forces in France. Her IISS record is 2 Shangri-La dialogues and now One Manama Dialogue, and we look forward to seeing her in Singapore in June. Second, our marvelous host here, Sheikh Khalid bin Ahmed Al Khalifa, whose Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been a great support to this Manama Dialogue process, and who has so often, of course, spoken from this podium, providing not just a Bahraini, but also a Gulf perspective. And delighted also to have Ayman Safadi, who has made Herculean efforts to be with us this morning, having flown in from New York, being diverted to the pleasant city of Madrid, but one which nevertheless slightly delayed his arrival here. And I admire both his vigor and enthusiasm for ensuring that the message of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan is always delivered here at the Manama Dialogue. So with that, could I ask Florence Parly to take the podium and address the first plenary of the Manama Dialogue.
Dear fellow ministers, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be with you today. I'd like to pay tribute to our gracious Bahraini host and the IISS, but having participated to IISS dialogues twice, I have already exhausted my catalogue of superlatives, so dear John Chipman, please allow me to get away with a simple thank you. John, I want to thank you particularly because when I run through the titles of other panels today, I have the impression that you placed me in the one where I can really speak my mind. When it reads regional stability or maritime security, I see what there isn't rather than what we have. By contrast, with regional competition, I trust I am at the right place. And it's also a pleasure to sit down with my colleagues from Jordan and Bahrain, two countries that matter a lot to France. But first, allow me to ask you to pause for a minute and think how far things have changed recently. 4 years ago, in the corridors of this very building, many of you were stunned, watching on screens the images of cruise missiles fired from the Caspian Sea into Syria. Those images resonated strangely. How could they not summon those other images of missiles fired into Iraq 12 years before? Except this time, they were caliber instead of tomahawks. Closer to us, there were the images of a meeting in Astana, that remote bit of Central Asia, where 3 non-Arab leaders pretended to adjudicate Syria, that quintessential Arab country. And closer still, we had images of bearded generals inspecting the debris of a US drone shot down over the Gulf, that mighty piece of technology being paraded on Fast News. The Middle East is an empire of signs. Nowhere is the art of messaging more sophisticated, and nowhere is a propensity to interpret symbols stronger than in this region. The signs are plain for all to see, and they hint at the severe weakening of an order based on cooperation that makes of US presence, norms, a degree of multilateralism, some stability of governance, and a great deal of deterrence. For what has happened as this decade is coming to a close? We've seen a deliberate, gradual US disengagement. It had been in the cards for a while, but it became clear when fighter jets remained on the tarmac in 2013 after the Syrian chemical attacks, or later, after the downing of a US UAV and the bombing of Saudi oil facilities. With the cornerstone moving, the edifice has started shaking and opportunists to rush in. The region is accustomed to the ebb and flow of US involvement, but this time it seemed more serious, courtesy of the fracking revolution and the rise of China. It is a slow process, after all. Hasn't a US carrier strike group just entered the Gulf? But the trend is, I think, quite clear, and thus probably irrespective of who wins the next election. As a result, with several actors stepping in to fill the vacuum, we've seen the landscape become more complex and entangled, with Turkish spoken in Issa, Russian in Benghazi, and even Chinese in nearby Djibouti. With the US looking sometimes elsewhere, an entire grammar of deterrence needs to be reinvented. No place better exemplifies this than the Gulf. When the mining of ships went unanswered, a drone got shot. When that, in turn, went unanswered, major oil facilities were bombed. Where does it stop? Where are the stabilizers? This is dangerous, even for those who think they gain, because bold is never far from daring, and daring never far from reckless. Do norms and multilateralism, these standard expressions of cooperation, provide any relief? Hardly so. In fact, norms are being weakened in the region. The saddest example is Syria, where every international taboo has been broken by the regime and allies. Cities besieged, populations starved, children tortured, hospitals targeted, and chemical weapons being used time and again, covered by foreign obfuscation and regime lies. And multilateralism provides little comfort. The JCPOA is reeling from a string of recent blows. The whole body of international rules on Palestine, including UN security resolutions, is also being spectacularly disregarded these days. Regional organizations are divided, and the GCC is no exception. As for the Arab League, I believe its internal balance has been deeply affected in this decade, from the Arab Spring to wars in the region. Even the fight against terror hardly manages to unite us all. A sad example was the way Turkey recently cracked down on the Kurdish Arab militias that helped us roll back Daesh. This prompted the French president to ask for a serious update of the NATO software. Against this rather depressing backdrop, there are also intriguing new developments. In Lebanon, a generation that was not born at Taif and was hardly grown of age in 2006 is taking to the streets to protest against an entrenched system that fails to deliver a decent living to most. In Iraq, it is, among other things, the meticulous Iranian attempt to control the country that is being rejected by youths in the streets, where competition between states seems hopeless, competition between generations may be the next frontier. Now, how to navigate the future? Can there be any prospects for future cooperation? I will venture a French perspective. Don't expect it to be entirely neutral or distanced, because in French hearts, this region is home too. A spiritual home for France's Muslims, Christians, Jews. A home for our memories, good and bad, as France has had a long presence over centuries in the area. A home today for as many as 240,000 French citizens who live and work here, and a temporary home for 2,800 French soldiers who serve in partnership with countries in the region in the fight against Daesh or as peacekeepers in Lebanon. There is no coincidence. Our involvement in the region is strategic, enduring, and sincere. It is rooted in friendships. It is rooted in mutual interests. It is rooted in a common analysis of threats, especially of terrorism. Our action will follow a few simple principles that I would like to outline for you. First, we will support our friends, and we will not waver in that support. Tomorrow, I will fly to the Emirates when we have a defense agreement, 3 military bases, and a rock-solid relation that I will make my duty to deepen further. Earlier this month, after the attack of Abqaiq and Khorais, I have sent to Saudi Arabia a robust package of advance warning, including a sophisticated radar and tens of servants to deter drone and cruise missile attacks. We will stand by our allies. You can count on us. Second, we will apply an equal determination to fight terror and uphold rules. We have constantly argued that it was necessary to remain engaged in the fight against Daesh in Syria. ISIS leaders have been killed and territory reclaimed, but the profound crisis of governance that made Daesh's emergence possible is still there. The regime is unreconstructed. And sure enough, from town to river and river to desert, Daesh is looming again. We will remain engaged in the coalition. France's aircraft will continue to strike relentlessly, and French forces will continue to train and equip partner forces. Don't expect a lesser commitment from us on upholding rules. I am thinking of chemical weapons here. Their use is an insult to international law and to humanity. It is an absolute red line for France. As I see the clouds gathering again in the Idlib province, I want to reiterate our solemn warning. There will be a heavy price to pay if those weapons are used again. Third, we will continue to speak to everyone, and we will not let ourselves be forced to choose between our friends. France speaks to everyone. That includes Iran. We deplored the US decision to step out of the JCPOA. We deplored in equal measure the severe recent breaches of the same JCPOA by Iran. But we will continue to engage Tehran. You would never waste your time when you try to prevent escalation. The JCPOA was our plan A. I'm not sure what plan B its critics had in mind. What is sure is that we want to avoid sleepwalking to plan C, with C for conflict. The same state of mind will guide us in our partnerships in the region. Today, I'm in Bahrain. Tonight, I will be in Abu Dhabi. And on Monday, I'll be in Doha. We have many friends, and their occasional disputes are no reason for us to part with any. Fourth, we'll try to involve our European friends in the region's stability. I believe Europe can play a moderating role, all the more so as most of us, Europeans, have friendships on both sides of the region's rivalries. In that spirit, France is currently working to put together a European maritime surveillance mission, distinct from the policy of maximal pressure. It will be separate from, but coordinated with, the US presence. Several European countries have confirmed their willingness to contribute. We hope it will help establish facts, ensure presence, and above all, cool down tempers. Last, we will want to offer a vision that goes beyond security. I know the saying, if you have visions, go see a psychiatrist. I would say, if you lack vision, you should go to see a doctor too. I believe France can help devise cooperative solutions for the challenges of tomorrow, and not only the austere agenda of who fights whom and who deters whom. I'm thinking climate, where we will campaign to uphold the Paris Agreement, technology, where our companies will pioneer transfers to local industry, and improving people's lives, from clearing mines in post-ISIS northeastern Syria to developing smart cities in the Gulf. As you can see, the agenda is vast, the prospects are great, but my time is out. So I will now hand over the floor and thank you again for your kind attention.
Madame Parly, thank you very much, and I'm sure the superlatives about your presentation are whirling around the room, and the request for a full text of those very important remarks are coming in very fast. I think the way in which you married policies of defense and deterrence to a firm expression of actual political will is one of the many messages that the audience will have taken away from this. With that, could I invite our host, Sheikh Khalid bin Ahmed, to address this opening plenary. Thank you very much.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, dear participants, first let me thank Mr. Bill Emmett, Chairman of Trustees of the IISS, and of course, my friend Dr. John Chipman, who I've done this panel with several times. And I will have to also continue to thank Mr. Francois Eisberg. I want to thank you for your dedication to IISS and the Manama dialogue. And I heard you're here with us here. So thank you very much again. The title of this panel is very fitting to the situation and the picture of the Middle East: cooperation and competition. If you look at the region today, we find states with competing objectives. There are states that seek cooperation, stability, and prosperity. And there are states that seek domination and harmful competition. Amongst the states of the region, the GCC, Egypt, and Jordan are the cornerstones of regional stability. The GCC, Egypt, and Jordan are major contributors to peace and security, not only in the region, but the world. We have taken the lion's share of the burden in the region in fighting terrorism, protecting vital shipping lanes, and combating foreign-backed militias and dealing with refugees' crises. We have also taken the brunt of the attacks. We have experienced terrorist attacks, drone and missile attacks on critical infrastructure, attacks on our shipping vessels, among other threats. Yet we remain solid and steadfast in our commitment to ensuring regional stability and security. Going forward, the GCC, Egypt, and Jordan are poised to play an indispensable role in the security of the region. Our cooperation spans all fields, including trade, education, energy, and water. Bahrain's commitment to the GCC and our allies is unwavering as we face shared challenges and cooperate in pursuing our goals. In securing the region, regional countries cannot go it alone. The region is a global region, and just as international community benefits from the region, it also shoulders its share of responsibilities towards it. Global powers are an integral part of the regional architecture, and in an interconnected world, that will remain the case. The United States of America is and will remain an integral part of the stability, security, and prosperity of our region. We in Bahrain share a strategic relationship with the United States of America, based on shared values and interests, and we are continuing and deepening this partnership at all levels. We are continuing our efforts to set up the Middle East Strategic Alliance with the US, GCC, and Jordan, further cementing our strategic ties. We also share a historic and strategic relationship with the United Kingdom. The region's partnership with the UK is also a major contributor to peace and security in the region. Other major allies and partners like France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and Australia, among many others, also play a major role in the region, and we appreciate our strong bilateral and multilateral ties. What about Russia and China? Russia and China are not new to the region. Cultural, trade, and political ties have existed and grown between us for a very long time. Today, Bahrain and the rest of the GCC have close ties with Russia, China, among many other European and Asian states. Much has been made of potential competition between great powers in our region, but we don't see this as a foregone conclusion. Instead, we envision a more cooperative approach where interests of all relevant stakeholders are respected. I must also add that when we talk about our partnership with the allies and friends, this is not a one-way street. Bahrain and the rest of the GCC are doing our part in securing our own region. We are involved in securing our seas, airspace, and countries through our own means and armed forces. We have and continue to take part in coalitions to combat piracy, terrorism, illicit trade, among other challenges. Our armed forces have participated in liberating Kuwait, securing Afghanistan, and fighting Daesh, and they are currently involved in the fight to restore legitimacy and security in Yemen. We are committed to doing our part and sharing the burden of protecting our region in partnership with our friends and allies. What are the major challenges we face? What are the impediments to better cooperation in the region? I will focus today on hegemony, interference, and terrorism. Unfortunately, there are countries in the region that prefer confrontation to cooperation and behave in ways that threaten the safety and security of neighboring states. The principles of non-interference, respect of sovereignty, and good neighborliness are not new concepts. They are the cornerstone of the rule-based international system we all benefit from. The United Nations Charter includes these principles, and for good reason. Yet the principles seem to have been forgotten by some countries in the region. The primary example of this is Iran. It is truly unfortunate that Iran continues to interfere in the affairs of the region and continues its attempts to impose its hegemony. In Iraq, Iran continues to impede Iraq's progress as a modern state, capable of providing for its population. Iran does not care about the Iraqi people. It pays no attention to the health of the Iraqi economy, nor whether people in Iraq feel safe and confident in the future. Iran cares only about its own interests and pursuing its hegemonic ambitions. In Lebanon, Iranian interference has led to stagnation, paralysis in Lebanon's political system, and repeated confrontations internally and with their neighbors. Here again, Iran's interference is for the sole purpose of extending its influence and hegemony through its terrorist proxy, Hezbollah, regardless of the negative effects on Lebanon and its people. In Syria, Iranian militias have established substantial presence, no doubt aimed at deepening its involvement in Syria and establishing long-term control. We value the role and the interests of the United States and Russia in Syria, and we would like to see those efforts come together for the sake of stability and security in Syria. Without international cooperation in Syria between major powers, regional countries will continue to compete over it and attempt to impose control. In Yemen, Iran continues to back the Houthi terrorist group and benefits from the continuation of conflict in Yemen, inhibiting the prospects of the political solution that we all desire. I'd like to be clear. Iran did not merely take advantage of the Houthi attempt to take over Yemen to get a foot in the door. Iran helped create the Houthi terrorist group from the start and provides it not only with weapons and training, but also with guiding ideology and slogans, as they are still doing in other parts of the Middle East. In my country, Bahrain, we have experienced the full brunt of Iran's interference for almost 40 years. Despite periods of increased cooperation and despite our numerous efforts over the years to have better relations, Iran just doesn't seem capable of viewing Bahrain as anything other than a target. These past few months, Iran has stepped up its belligerent actions and attacked oil refinery installations in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Iran has also attacked commercial ships in the Sea of Oman and the Arab Sea, threatening maritime safety and security. So, what is the way forward with Iran? When we talk about the JCPOA, the current one, which could be on deathbed or comatose or any sort, we do want a better JCPOA. That's the better alternative for us, is to have a JCPOA that will stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons and stop a possible arms race in the region, and also stop them from weaponizing their rockets. And we have examples in the attacks on the facilities in Saudi Arabia, and stop their hegemonic policies and aims in the region. That will be the JCPOA that we all want. That will be the JCPOA that will ensure long-term peace and stability in the region. We in the GCC, as responsible countries, have never and will never advocate for regime change in Iran. We have never and will never interfere in Iran's internal affairs. We have nothing but respect for the Iranian people, and we want to see them prosper, because peace and prosperity in Iran will benefit the entire region. We call upon Iran to pay more attention to its neighbors than other international relationships, and to seeking peace with us. Iran cannot solve its problems with the international community while ignoring the countries of the region. Their interest is here, among their neighbors. So what about Iran's new proposal to set up a regional grouping for countries around Hormuz? The proposal is fundamentally flawed. It does not include countries geographically outside the region, but with vital interest in the region. As I said, this is an international region, and any effort to establish or set up a regional grouping of countries must take this into account. We all have a stake in the region, whether we are considered regional or not, and what occurs in one area of the world will undoubtedly affect another. We have also been offered a so-called non-aggression pact as well. But the questions remain on what this pact means and whether it includes Iran's interferences and the action of their proxies. Will this pact only consider conventional threats and ignore the actions of Iran terrorist proxies? This is not acceptable. What we lack more than anything else with Iran is trust. There is a serious lack of trust when dealing with the Iranian regime. We have no choice but to take anything we hear from them with a grain of salt. Without sincere steps to build trust, effective cooperation in the region will remain difficult. In the past, we had examples of achieving a good level of trust with the late Shah of Iran, when he recognized Bahrain and became a very important and most important ally for us in the region here. After taking the advice of the former King of Saudi Arabia, King Faisal, the former King of Jordan, King Hussein, and the late Emir of Kuwait, Sheikh Sabah al-Salam. And he became a very important partner in trade and commerce, but that only lasted for a decade. We had windows with the Islamic Republic during the time of President Hashemite Rafsanjani, who had personal agreements with the late King of Saudi Arabia, King Abdullah, and the former President Khatami. So we do not see that the Islamic Republic is an impediment. We do look forward to work with the Islamic Republic on better grounds. Another challenge in the region is Israel's action in the West Bank. Israel continues to ignore international law and the relevant UN resolutions as it expands its settlements in the West Bank and continues its occupation of the Golan Heights. Israel must show its desire to make peace and commit to the establishment of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state. Then can it truly benefit from the better relations with the region. The hopes and aspirations of the Palestinian people must be heard. They deserve to live in their own sovereign country, like everyone, and to seek a better, more secure future for their people. Any effort must place peace at the forefront of its objectives, and any broker must be a broker for peace, not just security. On the challenge of terrorism, we remain committed with our allies in fighting all forms of terrorism, including fighting Daesh, Al-Qaeda, the Houthis, and Iranian proxies like Hezbollah and Saraya al-Ashtar, among many others. We have not and will not hesitate to join forces with our friends and allies in fighting terrorism wherever it arises and in any part of the globe. And we call upon all countries of the region to commit to fighting terrorism in all its forms and wherever it arises, and to stop all forms of support, whether direct or indirect, to terrorist and extremist groups. As I conclude my remarks, it's important to recognize that there are many pressing challenges we need to pay attention to other than what I have spoken about, such as water scarcity, education, our youth for the challenges, educating our youth for the challenges of our century, economic development and providing jobs for the next generations, and combating the effects of climate change. Yet, cooperation on these issues is impeded by the challenges we face of hegemony and terrorism. If not for the security challenges, we would have been able to devote more time, resources, and energy to those other challenges and opportunities. I reiterate the critical importance of the GCC, Egypt, and Jordan as a bedrock for security in the region, along with our international partners. It is this partnership that is best placed to challenge and bring an end to the conflicts that stands between the region and true stability and prosperity for all. Just like we need to address climate change worldwide, we need a change of climate here. As it were in the region, a change of ideas and a change of outlook. We need a climate that is more conducive to peace and cooperation, where countries are more prone to cooperate for the common good and less prone to confrontation, armed competition, and hegemonic ambitions. I feel optimistic that this is possible, and Bahrain will do its utmost and will do its part to pursue peace, stability, and prosperity in the region and beyond. Thank you very much.
Sheikh Khalid, thank you very much for those remarks. Two reactions from me. One, I think many will have taken note of your diplomatic maxim near the end, that any broker must be a broker for peace, not just a broker for security. And I think that offers a general strategic guideline that all of us should take into account. And secondly, I think when we move to the debate, we will be interested in discussing in more detail the kind of arrangement with the Islamic Republic of Iran that would work to deal with the multiple challenges it poses. In short, do we need what you styled, in essence, a grand bargain JCPOA that takes into account all the challenges and threats, or is it possible to update and modernize and improve an arms control agreement and then exercise policies of defense, deterrence, and good governance to deal with the influence networks. And I think it would be interesting to have a sense of which of these two approaches is the one most likely to succeed. With that, could I ask Ayman Safadi, Foreign Minister of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, to address us this morning. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good morning, everybody. And if I may start by thanking our brethren in Bahrain for their wonderful hospitality and for hosting this very, very important dialogue. And John, thank you so much again for the convening of yet another important Manama dialogue at a time when we do need to have a conversation. We do need to have the kind of open and frank dialogue that Manama affords. So thank you for that. And it's an honor to be on this panel with you and with the Minister Parley. Jordan and France are solid partners. We continue to cooperate together in pursuit of our common objective of bringing about peace and stability to the region. Yesterday, New York Times, His Majesty was speaking at Winneb, and he said, despite all the crises of the region, he derives hope from the region's youth, the majority of the population of this part of the world. The youth want jobs, they want stability, and they want opportunity. The title of our session is Cooperation and Competition, and I think this is an area in which we must cooperate, and this is an area in which we must positively compete, because providing that opportunity to our youth is the path to the future of peace and security and stability that we all seek. To be able to do that, we need to address the many crises with which our region has been grappling for decades. In Jordan, we've been at the receiving end of every crisis. Also, we've been at the forefront of every effort to bring about peace and stability and to resolve regional conflicts that have cost our region tremendous resources and much suffering. To do that, we cooperate with our brethren in the region and with our partners in the international community. We do that on the basis of our common values, of the right of every member, every citizen of this part of the world to live in peace and dignity. To create opportunities, we have to overcome crises. Unfortunately, of these, there are many in our part of the world. The oldest of which is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which continues to elude a solution, despite the many, many efforts of many of us around here and many of the countries that we represent. We all want peace, and we all know what it takes to achieve peace, but we all know that very little effort has been done to bring about that peace. We cannot have peace with occupation. This is the reality that we all must recognize. There can be no security with occupation. This is the reality that we must all recognize. To achieve peace, occupation has to end. The path to that is clear. We've all supported a two-state solution as the only viable option for achieving that solution. Unfortunately, unilateral Israeli measures are compromising the viability of that option, leaving us with a state of hopelessness that is causing many other conflicts and problems and creating despair on which every radical in this part of the world and beyond is preying. Settlements are illegal. Occupation is illegal and inhuman. Demolition of houses depriving people of their right to live in dignity will not bring about security, will not bring about peace. This is the reality that we must recognize, and this is the point of departure from which all efforts to bring about security and peace must start. We have to reinvigorate the peace process in a realistic manner, in a way that can realize the peace that is a right for every citizen in this part of the world. It's a right for Palestinian children, for Israeli children, for Jordanian children, for every child in this part of the world. We have to move quickly on that, because unless we do, we're losing the chance for peace. And that is something that will haunt our region for many, many more years to come. In the past 2-3 years, the peace process has been, quite honestly, dead. No traction has been happening. Unilateral measures are changing facts on the ground, making a two-state solution an impossibility. If we do not move now, where are we going to be 1 year from here? If it's not two-state solution, it's going to be a one-state solution. And if it's a one-state solution, there are only two ways to go. Either apartheid, where what would be more than 50% of the population of historical Palestine will be denied their rights, or it will have to be an equal right for everybody. And is this something that's going to happen or not? I think that's the question that we need to keep in mind. The other conflict which we have to address is the Syrian crisis. Again, in Jordan, we've been at the receiving end of that crisis, 367 kilometers of border with Syria. Conflict has been going on for almost 8 years. What's the end game? We all come together, we speak about the need for a peaceful solution to the conflict, but in reality, have we made any progress? Unfortunately, we have not. We in the region have to lead the solution, because we pay the heaviest price for the failure of achieving an end to that conflict. Millions of people have been displaced. Many countries, including Jordan, have had to deal with the burden of the conflict, not just in terms of security threats, not just in terms of disruption of our trade, but also in terms of having to host about 1.3 million of our Syrian brethren in Jordan. At a time when unemployment in Jordan is about 19%, when our GDP growth is under 2%, but we will continue to do the right thing in Jordan, because that's what Jordanians are, that's what they do. We've given about 150,000 work permits to Syrians. That's almost 3 times the number of jobs our economy can create on an annual basis. And unfortunately, again, we come together in conferences and meetings, we all speak about what needs to be done, but in reality, on the ground, very little is being done. The cost to that has been enormous, not just to Jordan, but to everybody in the region. What we need to do is, again, to have a regional grown solution for countries of this part of the world, in cooperation with our friends and partners, to move aggressively and actively towards a solution that will end that conflict, that will restore to Syria its stability, its peace, that will preserve the territorial integrity of Syria, and that would allow Syria to come back to play its role as a key country and as a main force for stability in our region. We also look at Iraq. Iraq has achieved a tremendous victory over ISIS. That victory came at a very high price to the Iraqis. It was achieved by the ultimate sacrifice, by blood, by people losing their lives. We need to preserve that victory by standing by Iraq as it tries to rebuild and stabilize, and to immune Iraq to the extent as possible from the repercussions of what's happening around us in the region as well. That brings me to talk about terrorism, a threat with which we all have had to deal over the past years. We all paid in blood as a result of terrorists and their ability to cause havoc, not just in the region, but also beyond. ISIS have been militarily defeated in both Syria and Iraq, but the security threat remains very potent. That means more cooperation among all of us in terms of intelligence sharing, in terms of trying to mitigate against their ability to regroup. And they're also an ideological challenge with which we also are having to deal, and which, frankly, only us in the region can take the lead in this fight. We need to expose terrorists for the thugs that they are, for the outlaws that they are. We need to be very aggressive in our narrative that they have nothing to do with our religion and its values of peace and respect. And to do that, we need to suffocate their ability to spread their agenda of hate. And that's why Jordan, His Majesty, has taken the lead in Aqaba process, which is trying to bring all of our efforts together in a comprehensive effort to have a holistic approach to fighting terrorism, suffocate their ability to spread their message, and produce narrative that will defeat their narrative and will expose it for what it is, a speech of hate that's outside not only our religion, but our common humanity as well. But in order to defeat Daesh as well, we need to defeat conditions on which it preys. That means we need to end conditions of chaos and instability and hopelessness that are spreading across the region. Daesh can only grow in conditions of chaos when people are desperate. We need to bring about hope, and that we do by solving the regional crises that unfortunately have been deepening over the last decade or so. And that's why I say we need to have a comprehensive approach, because the interconnectedness of our security is very, very clear. If you get Daesh in Iraq and Syria and you don't get them in Somalia, they're going to regroup there. If you get them in Somalia and you don't get them in East Africa, they're going to regroup there. And that's why the effort has to be holistic, and that's why we all need to work together. And again, the biggest challenge that we have to face now is how do we defeat their ability to spread their ideology of hate. That, again, is a collective effort on which we all have to cooperate. And I recall the meeting that Paris hosted for the Christchurch call, and that was a good example of how all of us can come together and stand together and show the terrorists that we are, despite whatever differences that we have, we stand united in challenging their ideology and in pooling our resources to fight it as well. My friends, the security of the Gulf is key to not just regional, but global security as well. And I want to emphasize that in Jordan, we stand unequivocally with our brethren in the Gulf, with Saudi Arabia, with Emirates, with Bahrain, in whatever measures they take to secure their countries and to ensure their stability and security against any threat, no matter what that threat is. My dear brother, Sheikh Khalid, spoke about relations with Iran, and I could say very comfortably that no Arab country wants conflict with Iran. What we want is regional relations based on mutual respect, based on non-intervention in the internal affairs of other countries. And that's why the call for dialogue has always been there. If we do not do that, then what is the end game? Where are we going with all this tension? And again, in all honesty and frankness, countries outside this region will be affected by conflict should it erupt in this part of the world. But the biggest price will be paid by us in the region, because it is us, it's our people, it's our stability that will be affected most. And that's why, again, homegrown, regional-grown solutions are the answer. We need to come together around a narrative that emphasizes what I've just said in terms of our willingness to engage in dialogue, to bring about relationships based in international law, based in respect of good neighborly ties, and to move forward. And that, again, is an Arab position that has been there for many, many years, and we continue to stand by it. We need to end this tension. Nobody will benefit from yet another conflict in this part of the world. My dear friend, Madam Parley, spoke of the Arab League and other regional mechanisms for cooperation. And again, I have to say that regional cooperation mechanisms in this part of the world are lacking, and if they are there, they're not effective. We need to invest in multilateralism, which is under threat globally, but that has not really been as effective as it should be in this part of the world in particular. And that's why, no matter how much criticism there is of the Arab League, it's the only regional mechanism that we have within the broader sense. We need to support it, and it can only be as effective and as strong as the will of its members. We support the unity of the GCC that has historically been a very successful example of regional cooperation, and I think we also need to emphasize how important it has been and to state very, very clearly that we support our brethren's effort to try and resolve whatever conflicts that existed within that mechanism. These are times that are becoming harder for everybody. Multilateralism, again, is something that we've invested for decades, and it has worked. It has solved many of the conflicts that we've had. It has created blueprints for cooperation in many issues that go beyond security conflicts, in water, environment, water security, youth empowerment, women empowerment. All are issues that are still very, very important to all of us. If we lose that multilateralism, what is the choice? What is the alternative? Madam Parley spoke of Plan A and B when it came to the nuclear deal, but I speak of Plan A and B of everything else. Palestinian-Israeli conflict, no two-state solution. What's Plan B? We don't have it. Syria, a political solution. What's Plan B? We don't have it. Iraq, supporting Iraq stabilize. If we don't, what's the price for all of us? What's Plan B? We don't have it. So in all of that, I think what's lacking is a committed to mechanism for all of us to come together and put ideas on the table and work them through and make sure that they are translated into tangible, practical solutions that will enable us to address all those issues. This is a region that has suffered tremendous crises over decades. This is a region whose population, whose youth are yearning for opportunity. They're yearning for a better future. And unfortunately, we have not been able to give them that future that they deserve. And unless we cooperate, unless we work together, unless we cooperate and compete in a positive way, compete in creating jobs, compete in advancing good governance, compete in advancing good relations, we will not be able to create the opportunity that they deserve, and we will all suffer as a result. So I will just close by saying that we do have competition in the region. Unfortunately, it was not the right kind of competition. We did not have enough cooperation, so maybe the challenges that we're facing will, I think, compel all of us to cooperate more and to compete more, but in a way that will address the needs and rights of all our people. Thank you so much.
Ayman, thank you very much. Your message, invest in multilateralism that is effective, suffocate the terrorists as they try to spread their agenda, keep intact the principles of international law that preserve the prospect of a two-state solution, and stick to Plan A because the Plan Bs are often not nearly good enough. So thank you very much for those 4 messages. We move immediately to the discussion. I have 6 or 7 people on my list. I'll ask them to intervene and then bring back comments to the panel. I remind you that we will move immediately from this panel to the second, which will include Minister of State of Foreign Affairs Adel Jubair of Saudi Arabia, Minister of State of Foreign Affairs Dr. Anwar Gargash of the UAE, and Sir Mark Sedwell, National Security Advisor of the UK. And I remind you all who have put your cards in, unless you press the button, I won't be able to call your name. But first on my list from the UK, formerly of the Times and now I think of Sky, Deborah Haynes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is a question for Madam Parley. You talked about American disengagement in the region and also of the need to review the grammar of deterrence. But why is it taking France and other European countries, with the exception of Britain, so long to launch this maritime security force to help protect shipping in the Gulf? And if I may, could you give a sense of what France's vision is for the future of NATO, particularly with regards to potentially resetting NATO's relations with Russia? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next, Amma Fikri from the UAE.
Thank you. My question is to Their Excellencies, the Foreign Ministers of Bahrain and Jordan. What are the implications of Egypt's withdrawal from MESA, given its importance on all fronts? As in, would this withdrawal undermine or marginalize this initiative? And how can we make this initiative more effective? Thank you.
Thank you. And from Saudi Arabia, Abdullah Al-Sadoun.
Thank you. Shura Council, Saudi Arabia. First of all, Sheikh Khalid mentioned very important things, and that is Iran 40 years ago is not Iran's now. And I think the most dangerous things, and this is also from Madame Parley, that Iran is using religion to the conflict and influence neighboring countries. And Iran and Europe knows how dangerous it is. 300 years they've been fighting between Catholic and Protestant. That's exactly what Iran is trying to do between Muslims, Sunni and Shia. And that's very dangerous. There are things, if you can lay the message that economy and good relation work much better, much easier, and it is win-win case instead of trying to influence just built on religion. That's very dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. François Hesbourg.
Thank you very much. If I may, I'd like, first of all, to thank Sheikh Khaled for his very gracious words directed at me. I am truly touched. Thank you very much. My question is to Florence Parly and to Sheikh Khaled. In your presentations, you both mentioned the attack against Abqaiq and other Aramco facilities. Now, that attack was not only asymmetric in the sense used by you, John, in your presentation yesterday evening, it was also operationally very elegant. To my understanding, there was no collateral damage, and it drew no corresponding response, at least in the short run. This is quite a remarkable operation. It is one which probably cost no more than $10 to $20 million in capital expenditure, and it produced major payoff for Iran in terms of alliance politics in the region and in terms, I presume, although I cannot prove it, an impact on the valuation of the Aramco IPO. What conclusions do both of you draw from this attack, not so much in terms of what it means for the relationship with Iran? Both of you have done that extremely clearly, but more broadly in terms of our own defense choices, because this is the sort of operation which can be conducted by many other countries. Indeed, for me, the template of that operation is given in Jeffrey Lewis's book with his North Korean war scenario for 2020, which came out 2 years ago. So does this imply a substantial change in our defense postures, and particularly in societies as vulnerable as those of the Gulf, oil-dependent, and living largely in air-conditioned, extremely vulnerable glass skyscrapers, great targets for drones and cruise missiles, and largely filled with footloose expatriates? I know it's a big question, but I think it deserves an answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alistair Burt.
Thank you, John. Can I start by thanking Sheikh Khalid for making it very clear that until we resolve some of the geopolitical crises we are familiar with, we won't get onto the larger issues like climate and migration that may dominate this conference in a decade's time. And secondly, I share the despair of Minister Safadi, the failure to resolve the issues between Israel and the Palestinians, and that should be a worry to all of us that after so long this still goes on, particularly in light of comments made by Secretary of State Pompeo this week. The question I wanted to address was to Madame Parly, if I may, and it's on the subject we've just discussed. Madam, you spoke about the failure of the stabilizers. Where are the stabilizers in relation to the actions of the shooting down of the drone and the attack on infrastructure? I wanted to ask you, what in particular do you think is the failure? Is it the failure to respond militarily to those, or is it the failure of deterrence by way of diplomacy beforehand? If the stabilizers are to work, which is it? Is it a proper military response? Is it better deterrence diplomacy? Or is it a combination of both that led to your conclusion that the stabilizers aren't there anymore?
Thank you. And from Jordan, Barak Madin.
Yeah, thank you. My question is to His Excellency Ayman Safadi. Yesterday, His Majesty spoke in Washington and said that our relation with Israel is at an all-time low. And you just mentioned in your presentation now that for the past 2-3 years, the peace process has been dead, more or less. Now, where does that leave us in Jordan, and what cards do we have, or do we intend on playing to, save ourselves from the repercussions of such deadlock? Thank you.
Thank you. And from the IISS and the United States, Dr. Corey Shockey.
Thank you, John. The foreign minister of Jordan mentioned that regional institutions are ineffective, and I'd be very curious if folks on the panel would give a sense of what you'd like to see to make regional organizations more vibrant and more capable of a greater contribution to these problems.
And finally, Benjamin Barthes from France.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a question to Mrs. Parley. You sent quite a strong warning to the Syrian regime. You said that it will pay a heavy price in case chemical weapons are being used. Could you be a little bit more specific? I mean, do you have any kind of intelligence that make you think such weapon could be used another time in Syria? And in such a case, would you be ready, as you did in the past, to launch attack against targeted targets in Syria? And then I have a question to His Excellency Sheikh Khaled bin Ahmed. I would like to know, where does the Kingdom of Bahrain currently stand regarding the crisis with Qatar? We saw recently small moves that have been interpreted as encouraging signs by some observers. All the team of football team of the GCC will play in the coming days in the Gulf Cup in Qatar. So, I mean, shall we think that the crisis with Qatar is moving in the right direction? Are you hopeful there could be a solution in the coming, in the near term? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I recognize there's a few people still wanting the floor, but we need to move smartly into our next plenary by 10 o'clock. So I'll invite the three panelists to respond to the questions put to them in reverse order, starting with Ayman Safadi, then Sheikh Khaled, and then Madame Parley. Ayman, over to you.
Thank you, John. On MISA and the question on Egypt's not being part of that initiative anymore, I'd like to emphasize that Egypt's role is indispensable. Egypt is leading Arab country, and it has been a major force for stability, and we have to make sure that we continue to cooperate and work together within, as Sheikh Khaled said, GCC, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco. We all need to, and many others, we all need to work together, but Egypt's role is indispensable. We look at MISA as an effort to bring about collective effort to address the security challenges in the region. In Jordan, we support any effort that will pool our resources towards solving these crises and making sure that we move forward towards peace and stability. And in doing that, we will always work with Egypt. We'll always partner with Egypt because, again, we cannot do without an active Egyptian role. And the partnership that we have, and I'm speaking not just about Jordan, but I think I'll be right in speaking about all other partners in the GCC and others that we have tremendously solid partnership with Egypt in addressing all those challenges. On the issue of regional organizations, look, again, very openly, we need to mature a little bit in how we address our regional work. We need to start learning to immune economic cooperation, environmental cooperation, and other issues from political ups and downs, and that's something that we have not done. Quite often in the region, we'll see that great effort, great successes that have been achieved in economic cooperation and investment, environment, otherwise, and other issues, and then we lose it all at the event of some political disagreement emerges. That's something that we need to be able to learn to prevent from happening again. And look, any collective effort is as strong as its members want it to be. And we have to invest more in accepting that we will all benefit more from working together. We need, again, to learn to compartmentalize. It's not we agree on everything or we agree on nothing. Countries agree on a lot of issues and disagree on a lot of issues, but strategic interests bind them together. And I think it is a clear fact to everybody that all of us in this part of the world, we need to work together because we are impacted by our inability to solve the crises that have affected us. We need regional grown solutions to regional challenges for which we're paying the heaviest price. And unless we're able to create functioning regional cooperation mechanism, our efforts to address them will continue to be lacking. I think we all want to cooperate more. We all want to strengthen regional cooperation mechanism, but probably we need more effort at structuring that and ensuring its efficiency and ability to deliver regardless of ups and downs in policies regarding individual issues. On the issue of Jordan-Israel relations, as His Majesty said yesterday in New York, they are at all times low. We have not been able to achieve bilateral cooperation on many of the issues that are limited to Jordanian-Israeli cooperation. We had the Red Dead, for instance, project, which was ready to be tendered. Last minute, Israel decided not to go ahead with it, and it stopped. 25 years into the peace treaty, and we all remember, if you all remember the days of when the treaty was signed during the time when all Arab countries were engaged in a collective effort to have collective peace. We all spoke of peace dividend. Where is that peace dividend? I'll just give you one example. Our exports to the West Bank are a little bit north of $100 million compared to over $4 billion of Israeli exports to the West Bank. Why? Because of Israeli measures that do not allow us to export there. So if you come and tell people there is peace dividend, they ask you where is it? So that's in as far as bilaterals are concerned. And as far as the overall ecosystem, the regional environment, you all remember the Jordanian-Israeli peace treaty was signed at a time when, after the Palestinians have signed Oslo, Syria was engaged in very, very serious negotiations, and the promise then was a collective peace. 25 years into that, where is the peace process? Again, occupation continues, a violation of Palestinians' rights continue, prospects for a two-state solution that would allow for the emergence of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state on June 4, 1967 lines with East Jerusalem as its capital. We're nowhere near that. So that not just affects Jordan-Israeli relations, that affects the whole regional environment. And let me again refer to the Arab Peace Initiative, which remains the most comprehensive offer for a comprehensive peace, not between Israel and all Arab countries, on the basis of a comprehensive solution that will end the occupation that began in 1967. That initiative has not been seriously picked up by the Israelis, and we are today in a situation where, again, as I said, the unilateral measures are jeopardizing the viability of the two-state solution, look at the holy sites, and His Majesty is the custodian, as you know, of the Christian and Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem. And day in, day out, we are engaged with efforts to try and prevent violations of the status quo of those sites. So all that said, I'll close by saying that that said, yes, there are challenges to the relations, and our commitment to peace remains unwavering because we do believe that peace is the right for everybody, but our also commitment to the conditions for achieving that peace remains solid. You cannot have peace unless the Palestinians have their legitimate rights, and we will continue to do everything we can with our brothers and partners to bring about that peace and bring about that end of occupation and the two-state solution. That is the only way to achieve regional peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayman. Wonderful. Sheikh Khalid bin Ahmed.
Thank you, John. The question about Egypt and Mesa, to be clear, Egypt did not withdraw from Mesa. Egypt paused their participation in Mesa, for reasons that they explained, that the pace of evolution for Mesa to achieve, the full requirements for Mesa is very slow. But we definitely see Egypt a natural, important part of any structure for peace, stability, and security in the region. And as Mesa moves forward, it will be clearer that Egypt is part of it and not outside of Mesa. The question about Abqir, coming from Mr. Heisberg. The region has always faced challenges from one level to another. If you look at the Iran-Iraq war and then the challenge of the occupation of Kuwait, and then the war in later years, we have always faced new level of threats from weapons, from missiles, from all sorts of threatening weaponry to our cities and towns in this whole region. And we've always been able to work with our allies to face those challenges. So we do welcome the partnership between Saudi Arabia and the United States of America that was announced recently to provide for security and protection of vital facilities. And we think that will be handled in the right way between the allies and us. And this is something we've always been ready to face every time. Talking about regional organizations, I think there are many ways. We have the Arab League and we have some other organization, but most importantly in our region is the Arab League. The Arab League, I agree with Brother Ayman that it's always been our home, our voice that would articulate our positions to the world. But yes, we do want to see more cooperation between the Arab League and other regional groupings like the European Union, like the African Union, and in this regard, this will enhance the ability of the Arab League and regional organizations to work together for the benefit of all. And also, when we come to talk about our region, I myself always prefer to use the term Arab world rather than the Arab land or Arab nation. This is a world of many ethnic groups and cultures living together, be it in the center of our cities or be it in the perimeters of the countries in Africa and in Asia. This should suggest that one day we should transcend those borders and include other regional countries to be part of this grouping one day. But I'm not suggesting it now, but for future, looking forward, how long are we going to remain as the only 22 Arab countries? The Arabs are part of the world and part of this whole region. So this should be and will always, and I do expect it to be looked at sometimes in the future. Talking about Qatar, well, Qatar has a problem with our countries. Yes, we did protect ourselves from a lot of what used to come from Qatar. The strategic level cooperation has always continued, be it in the military and the continuity of the summits have been going on and other important meetings in the GCC. It has not been derailed, it has not been paralyzed in any way. But it's in the hands of Qatar to make sure that all our worries that led to us to boycott them are dealt with from their part, and then the picture will be different between us and Qatar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Florence Parly.
Thank you. The first question was about the Maritime Security Initiative, and the question was first, why does France does not follow the American-led initiative? The reason is very simple. We prefer not to join because we want to make clear that our policy is separate from the maximum pressure American policy, which does not mean that we don't want to contribute to the security, the maritime security in the region. That's why we took the initiative to structure a European approach, and that approach would be separate but fully coordinated with the American one. It's an ongoing process, and I'm very confident that we will be able to start very soon. It will be led by Europeans. And if you look back, this kind of separate but coordinated initiatives were very successful in the past, and that's the way we did to fight against piracy of Somalia. And I would like to add that we are not subtracting anything. We are adding, as a number of countries would not have participated in the American initiative anyway. Second question about the future of NATO. It's not easy to answer briefly to this question, but I'm sure that you will share my view if I'm saying that there were some pending questions about the alliance, and this is not new. There were questions about the solidarity, Article 5. There are questions about the commitment of Europeans to better share the burden. What we've seen recently with the attack from Turkey along the border of Syria is that there is also a question about the way allies take into account the interest of others. So I think that the time now has come to move from the brain dead to the brainstorm. I mean that we need definitely to pause a bit and to think about the future of an alliance which is and remains the cornerstone of European security. And I would not deliver any secret today, but I'm pretty sure that during the summit in London, there will be proposals on the table, among which a group of wise persons, of elders, to think about the future of NATO. The following question was quite difficult about what conclusions from the attack in Saudi Arabia against oil facilities, and does it show that we are vulnerable? Yes, we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable to drone attacks, vulnerable to cruise missiles attacks, that's for sure. So we have to improve our abilities to protect ourselves. And what this attack shows is that it was a high-skilled operation. So we should not consider it as something that is not serious. So we are working on technologies able to protect better ourselves against this kind of attack, but this is a very serious warning. Do we failed from a military perspective or from a diplomatic perspective after this this attack against Saudi Arabian oil facilities? I would say that as a defense minister, my strong conviction is that negotiation, treaties, rules-based order are the best ways to ensure peace and security. And so I'm a strong supporter of diplomacy. The US decided to walk out of the JCPOA, which is to me the best tool we have to preserve and to prevent the region and more broadly the world from nuclear proliferation. Then there was this attack, and if you are not part of a treaty, then you should be part of a dialogue. The last question was about the chemical use of the use of chemical weapons. Is there a risk in the future that those chemical weapons to be used again? When you look at the situation in the Idlib province, I would say yes, there is a risk, and a strong risk. So France, with partners, I mean the United States and the United Kingdom, was part of a response when these chemical weapons were used in the past. And I am absolutely convinced that if these weapons would be used again, then France would be ready to act again.
Minister Padley, thank you very much. And on an earlier remark you made, may I just say that wherever there is a brainstorm, the IISS likes to be in the middle of it, and so we offer our services in London at the time of or soon after the NATO summit, once we know some of the suggestions that you and others will be making. Let me do two things. First, let me say that we are going to move immediately to the next plenary with Sir Mark Sedwell, Anwar Gargash, and Adel Al-Jubair. But before we do that, and without any of you leaving your seats, could you please, in the usual way, thank our panelists for their splendid presentations. Thank you very much.